Continuing our election coverage and profiles of political parties, we speak today to Qasim Khan. He is the premier candidate for the Western Cape's PAC, Pan Africanist Congress of Azania. Qasim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Radio Islam International.
Wa alaikum salam and shukran for having us.
So, Qasim, let me begin by asking you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to politics and the PAC in particular. There was a time when many would remember you being part of Islamic Relief, right?
Yes, mashallah. And yes, I started my activities first actually in political activities as in my youth. And later on in the underground of the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania. I then switched to work towards building the country when opportunities arose. And I joined and I started my social work degree, and that took me to various organizations, both government organizations, donor organizations, and of course implementing organizations such as Islamic Relief. What brought me to this particular point is that I realized it is really very important for us to be able to be in places where decisions are made, where resources at a massive scale is being allocated, and where we are holding, where we are able to provide a voice for the masses of people. Our smaller efforts, yes, are good laboratories of what can happen, can be done. But if we want to increase that, if we want to make sure that more people achieve those needs of theirs that is clearly not being met, then a political space in this country can clearly affect that.
Now, why the PAC in particular did you choose as your political home?
Yeah, the Pan Africanist Congress, my relationship with them started way back in more solidly in 1987 already. So in my youth, we managed to meet up with particularly former Robben Islander prisoners, one of which my mentor at that time was a man called Kwedi Mkalipi, and sadly he had just passed away 2 days ago. Um,
Hmm.
Kwedium Kalipi was from that generation of young people who, in his time, organized the anti-pass law campaign, which, as many of you will remember, particularly in the north of the country, resulted into the Sharpeville massacre. And what they then articulated to us that the primary importance that they had raised back in the 1960s already is that the major crime that was committed in this country by the settler colonialists was that of land theft. And that resonated very well with me. I particularly am somebody who always want to go to the cause of our problems and not just address some of the symptoms that we have. Um, and the symptoms are just a reflection of the causes that were not being addressed. And the cause that has not been addressed was that of, as I claim it to be, and many does, that of land theft that had started with the arrival of the colonialists and the settlers later on.
Now, the PAC has a long history, right? But in recent years, its political support has dwindled. It's been plagued by factionalism and infighting. What makes you optimistic that the party can rise again?
Yeah, I cannot deny the fact that the organization has some of its wounds that has impacted on itself. And But more importantly, I'm somebody who believes in the strength of an idea. In 1959, when the Pan Africanist Congress went on its own, they did not have the view that one campaign, one anti-pass law campaign, would be so massively supported and impact the direction of the country at the time, which it did, and resulted in the isolation of apartheid South Africa at that time. And so I'm one who believe, and many of us continue to believe, the strength of an idea is what carries a political a movement for its strength. So if we are very hopeful that the people will start to realize that if until we are able to reverse the impact of this land theft has been over the 3 decades now, and particularly over the 300 years. Will people come back towards the Pan Africanist Congress? And yes, it is up to us to strengthen and build this organization as we move forward and as we extend our message to the masses of South Africa.
What are the fundamentals that the PAC proudly projects itself on? I mean, if you look at it, land rights and economic empowerment for African people seems to be at the forefront. What's the plan there? What do you hope to achieve if you come into office?
Yeah, so one of the things that we are saying is there's a lot more information out there today that we can all act on. And when I say we can all act on it, I believe that it can be acted on at different levels of government that we have. So one of the first things is that we have something called the 2017 land audit that tells us immediately what land belongs to who and what land is available. And there is quite a bit of land that is available in the hand of the state. So when people ask us questions about, our schools are overcrowded, we have still 100,000 informal settlements across the country, and so forth. And these have further social problems. And we are saying we are now needing to move into action of political will. So, where there is land that is in the hands of the state, we must be able to use that land to be able to build more houses and houses with dignity. We are also, and so you don't build another version of an informal settlement with a bit of bricks and mortar. You build houses where people can live meaningful lives. If we are saying that our schools are overcrowded, where are these schools going to be built? It can be built on land that belongs to the state. And so, on the one level, there are things that can be done almost immediately. And more importantly, we believe that much of the development that is not taking place in this country is because the entire government at different levels, even if there are other parties who are ruling parts of the country, that it is uh, beset by all sorts of corruption. And so, one of the ways to be able to deal with that type of non expenditure with no political will is to strengthen the hands of law enforcement, and particularly strengthen the hand of the National Prosecuting Authority. They should actually have their biggest unit just dealing with issues of corruption. Because once that is done, the mood in the country will change, money will be made available, political will increase, and more of the social needs of our people will be met.
Hmm.
And so that can be done by first working on the land that is available. The second thing is there are lots of absentee landlords in South Africa. There are also people who own massive tracts of land, but they only use parts of it. And so, just already Section 25C of the Constitution allows for the state to take that land and use it specifically for public good. And so, these are things that is not rocket science. These are things that require political will, and any political party who is particularly serious will be able
Yeah.
to effect it. What we have found is that we have found 30 years of faffing around and not getting there. In fact, not just faffing around, 30 years of finding ways not to serve our people, but to fill our pockets. And we are looking at over a decade, for example, something like 1.2 trillion rand has been wasted. An annual amount for people who like numbers, something like 100 billion rand goes into
Hmm.
wastage through corruption.
So, Kasim, what's the PAC's position when it comes to coalitions? We know that we're heading to some extent in this election and then in coming elections towards coalition politics.
Yeah, our view towards coalitions is that if there is a need for the Pan Africanist Congress, for example, to add its voice to change the particular style and who will rule a particular province, or even if things become very dramatic, national government, we would be guided by what are you going to do for the mass of the people? What are you going to do fundamentally in addressing that issue of land theft. So for us, Section 25C of the Constitution, Section 25 of the Constitution will be particularly important. If you are going to say we will be acting on this very, very robustly, we will be able to make land available and prioritize the needs of our people, then we would be able to consider coalitions at that particular level. But if you have spurious and very almost questionable views on the issues of land, and particularly also on other issues of morality. So many people are saying that a dividing point in our political context in this country and in the world right now is, where do you stand on the issue of the genocide in Gaza, for example? These are all critical issues because Gaza itself is also about land and about land theft. And so these will be questions that we'll be keeping in mind should we be approached on the issues of coalition. We are not jumping in up and down and making that a priority right now, that we will go with this party or that party. What we are saying is, what are the principles? What is the things that would be fundamental for us? And you know what? We are not in it just to be able to say, well, you know what, we could get a ministerial position for this or an MEC position for that. Let's jump for this, that, and the other. Because that is the horse trading that really takes place behind. It's not principles, but it is positions of how smaller parties get bought out. Let us not fool ourselves that smaller parties are necessarily kingmakers.
Finally, I mean, what's your realistic expectations going into this election?
Well, the national leadership has said that um, after having dealt with all our major issues and problems and all the hurdles thrown in our way, and being a self-funded party, we are hoping for at least at national government level, we are looking at least 10 seats uh, uh, in the national parliament. So that is for us a realistic way of looking at that. We are working very hard to make sure that the people understand the message of the Pan Africanist Congress and understand what is the true reason for their oppression and their continued suffering in this country.
Qasim, all the best and shukran for your time.
Jazakallah khair, and thank you for having us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was Qasim Khan, premier candidate for the PAC.